and welcome to Desi in Design.
Whoa.
If you're new here, I'm your host, Sravya Attaluri. I'm a creative director and illustrator based in London. And on this podcast, I chat with other South Asian creatives about their career journeys, challenges, and triumphs. Today, I'm joined by Hetal Vasavada, a California baker, food writer, and cookbook author. With a background in biochemistry and years spent working in healthcare, Hetal made a bold shift into the world of food, going on to become a fan favorite on MasterChef US and now the author of 2 cookbooks, including her latest, Desi Bakes. In this episode, we dive into her path from science to sweets, how she weaves her South Asian heritage into her bakes, and the deeply personal stories that shaped her new cookbook. Hetal also shares how baking has supported her mental health, the importance of community and collaboration in the food world, and why preserving traditional craft through both design and cuisine matters now more than ever. Let's dive in. Thank you so much, Hetal. I'm so excited to have you on Desi in Design. I want to dive in first with a rapid fire round. I feel like it's a good warm up. Would you rather bake early in the morning or late at night?
Early in the morning.
If you could only eat one dessert forever, which one would it be?
That's hard.
You don't have to consume it every day.
It would be the tender coconut cream pie from my cookbook.
One ingredient you can't live without.
Cardamom.
Yeah.
On brand.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't expect anything else. If you could only use one emoji to describe your work, which one would it be?
The sparkle emoji.
Ooh. If you could instantly master any other creative skill, what would it be?
Ooh, sewing. Like, I can sew, but like I'm not an expert at it. But if I could like make my own clothes, I'd be unstoppable.
That is also so on brand for Desi Bakes. Okay, last one. Describe your dream creative collaboration.
Ooh, I would love to do something with... Okay, I have 2. One conventional, one unconventional. Unconventional, I would love to do something with Papa Don't Preach.
Yeah, I could see that.
I feel like my aesthetic and their aesthetic just really matches. And I'd love to put out like some fun cakes or cookies that like totally vibe off of their designs.
Yeah.
I think it'd be so fun and like so on brand. And then like a conventional mashup, I think I would love to work with... The thing is, like, I do a lot of collabs, right? Like, I was like, oh, ice cream. I'm like, I already did. I have a Malai collab out right now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess conventional, maybe working with a sprinkle company, maybe Fancy Sprinkle, or to create like a sprinkle line would be kind of fun.
Yeah. What about if you could like do a completely different industry?
I would I think fashion would be like my other. I'm not a fashion girly, but I have the vision. I see it.
You can creative direct.
Yeah, I'm really good at creative direction. When it comes to that, I'm not an everyday casual girl. Like, I want to dress up to the nines on a regular. My casual is like too casual, and my dressy is like very dressy. There's no in between.
I'm the same. I'm very much the same. So I feel you. I have so much respect for the fashion girlies. But I can see it. I totally can see a Papa Don't Preach collection, or like an inspired. I could totally see a whole event, with the desserts, with savory, and their like lengas and saris.
Yeah. I think it would be so beautiful.
I'm manifesting that for 2025. So I would love to get into actually your background in early life. From the beginning, were you always inspired by your South Asian heritage, or is that something you're retrospectively looking back on?
I think it was always there as an inspiration. I grew up in Jersey. It's like extremely Desi. I'm surrounded. I went to a school called University of Science in Philly, which no longer exists, but they used to call it University of Shahs and Patels because there's so many Indians at the school. And they weren't wrong. It was like 10 pages of Patels at graduation. But like the inspiration was always there just because I grew up very immersed in my culture. So the inspiration was constantly around me. I was eating all the Indian food, going to Edison, going to Jackson Heights, going to like people's houses. Like I had access, right? That a lot of people maybe some families moved to like middle of nowhere with no Indian community and they didn't have access. I luckily grew up with a lot of access to my culture, so the inspiration was always there.
When we were previously talking, you mentioned kind of crafting with your parents, like you've always had art outlets. What was the big takeaway from those like experiences?
Mistakes are okay. Like my mom taught me how to do bead work, so like making beaded jewelry, embroidery, doing regular embroidery. That was her area, and my dad was more into jewelry and jewelry design. And I learned that it was okay if something's messed up. There's always a way to go back, unstitch the mess up. You can, untangle the bead, take out the bead, slide it through. Yes, it's a little extra work, and maybe you may have to think a little bit extra on how to get it, but it's okay.
Yeah. So did you know and like see baking and cooking as a creative outlet, or was it more as you became a mom?
It started off because I needed to pass lab, and my orgo professor told me that if you could bake, you would pass lab, because it is extremely similar. You have to weigh your ingredients, you have to have your methods done right, you have to read the directions before you get started, right? Like there's a whole scientific like method to it. Same with baking. But baking has the creative aspect to it that I learned about as I started baking, where I was like, oh, now that the cake is done, I can decorate it however I want. I can add whatever flavors I want. So as I continued to bake and get better at it, I started learning about how can I apply the creative side that I have to these bakes.
Got it. I'm curious why you went into biochem first before going into baking, because I feel like a lot of people would relate to that journey.
Oh, you know how it is. Our Desi parents are like, you're gonna be a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, or a business person. That's it. And you know what, you can't even blame them, because like they only know of the careers that they have been exposed to, and the uncles and aunties that they knew that were of high status or high regard were always one of those four. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Rare that they met anyone outside of those four careers. And it's because they're financially stable and, all the things that come with that. So, I was like, okay, I guess I'll go into healthcare, but I didn't want to do biology because I found that to be too boring. And my worry was, if I don't get into med school, then I have a generic bio degree. What am I going to do? And I really liked chem. I like lab. So I decided to do biochem degree. And then I ended up doing my master's in biomedical sciences, and I just worked in healthcare because like as I was going to school, I was also working in healthcare. Mm-hmm. So like in the beginning, I worked at restaurants doing like waitressing, line cooking, cheesecake decorating, like whatever. And then I was a nanny, I was a roti auntie, I was, cooking to pay for school. And then as I got more education, I was able to switch over, and I worked as an organic chemist and then a medical biller. And as I increased my education and had a different monetizable skill outside of cooking, I leaned on that more. But I was still baking no matter what. Like I created a bake sale at my school called Periodic Table of Brownies, where like each element group was a different type of brownie. So I try to like bring in baking and stuff into anything I did. When I worked corporate, like I'm like, oh, if we meet our goals, I'll bake this, and if we don't, I'll bake a fail cake.
You just wanted an excuse to bake. Yeah.
Exactly. Any excuse to not be in a cubicle.
Yeah. What was the benefit that it brought you?
Yeah, mental relief, a lot of that. So I have ADHD, anxiety. Then on top of that, eldest daughter of immigrants. So like there's a lot of pressure. First person to go to college. My parents don't speak English, so I'm taking care of them. They also don't have any work at the time. So like it was just a lot going on in my life, So I used baking as an escape. I rage bake, procrastinate, mental health, self-care bake, like all the baking, all the emotional baking you would think of. I found it very zen because you can't think about anything else other than what you are doing in that moment. Because if you start thinking about what's going on in other aspects of your life, you will lose the plot and you will mess up. So you have to be extremely focused on like, oh yeah, I need 110 grams of flour. Okay, now I need to add this. Okay, now I need to mix this for 3 minutes. The only thing you're considering is the next step and what you're doing in that moment. There's no room for outside noise. And I very much enjoyed that aspect of it. It gives me a lot of peace of mind. I can turn my brain off. A lot of it is repetitive motion, like, rolling out cookie dough. It's a repetitive motion that I'm doing 24 or 34 times, and I can disassociate,
Yeah.
for lack of better terms. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a meditation.
Very much so. Yeah. Yeah.
What kind of inspired the leap fully from the medical field to baking?
I was super unhappy at my job. I didn't enjoy the corporate bureaucracy and politics at all. I was not good at it. I'm a straight shooter. I tell you how it is. If things aren't going well, things aren't going well. And like, you want me to, sugarcoat it? I'm not going to. You can't fix something by sugarcoating it. And I think that's something in the corporate world that people like to do. Like, oh yeah, like we might not have enough money for the next 6 months, but we're just going to pretend everything's fine. But if you bring it up, you're lowering the morale or whatever, BS that they want to find. I'm very much a realist in many ways. That mixed with the fact that I was one of maybe 4 people of color in a company of 500 people. And I got written up for stupid stuff like my leggings not matching my skin tone. Because like our dress code, we had to wear suits with tights that matched our skin tone. And like, you know what? Like brown people, our skin tone's different winter to summer. Like I'm like 20 shades of brown. So like stupid stuff like that. And I was just over it. My husband can see I was over it. And he knew that I got a lot of enjoyment out of cooking and baking. And I blogged and I was doing it as like a side thing. It was never anything that I like fully focused on. But he was like, why don't you just do this full time? And I'm like, I didn't go to culinary school. Are people really going to pay for this? It's a really niche thing that I do. Are there even enough people in the market to buy this? And then he was like, go on MasterChef, see how it goes. If you're worried about how you are stacking up against other home cooks, this is the perfect way to see where you land.
Yeah.
And I did it. And I somehow like managed to keep making it past each round. And I'm like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm just going to keep going. And then when I got off, I started working as a recipe developer and like food photographer, food stylist for like startups here in the Bay and restaurants. And then that evolved into social media management, which involved into my own social media, food writing and cookbook writing. So I feel like at this point, I'm like almost like Pokemon trying to do every single job in the food industry that is possible. Because I've been a dishwasher, I've been a line cook, I've run a bakery as like the head chef. I've done menu consulting, like any job in the food industry you could think of, I've done it.
Yeah. I think that is so important for people to hear though, because I feel like, especially with social media, I'm scared sometimes that young people see, okay, she's baking and she's doing it full time, so I'm just going to do that. But you actually went out there and got all of this different type of experience working for other people and, figuring it out. And then doing it for yourself makes a huge difference. And that experience and that age, like those years of work, putting in that learning makes a difference,
100%. I didn't go to culinary school, but I went and I would stage at bakeries or just asked to be like, hey, like, can I learn how to do this at your bakery? I really love your croissants. Can you teach me how you make them? I'll come in for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. So there's different ways you can go about it. And I was very lucky to be surrounded by really supporting people that were always quick to make sure my name was brought up at the whatever table they were at.
Yeah.
So,
that makes a big difference, right? Because you need people to champion you and like have your back. I think that community support is so important.
Yeah. And like, I know within the brown community, there's this whole sense of like competition. And I gotta say, I've very much experienced the opposite. I mean, not to say I know it exists, but I've been very lucky that I've experienced the opposite. I feel like my career is like a good chunk of luck and a good chunk of hard work. Like I was doing social media management for a cooking school in SF. Priya Krishna, her cookbook, Indianish, came out the same year as my cookbook. And she was coming to do a media tour in San Francisco and stopped at the cooking school that I was freelancing at. And I went to that meeting. I had an early copy of my cookbook and I just gave it to her. And I made a bunch of besan ki barfi to give her. Unfortunately, her dessert that the culinary school students were going to make failed. It didn't work out. And luckily I had made enough because I made enough to serve to the culinary students for them to try too. and for Priya to take home. We ended up serving my dessert instead at the table, which was filled with like other chefs and media folks from San Francisco. And I gave her an early copy of my book, thinking nothing of it. I was just excited to like meet her because she had interviewed me for a couple articles in the New York Times prior. So it was like the first time we were meeting in person. She ended up pitching a story to the New York Times about the book.
Wow.
Unexpected on my behalf. Totally was not expecting it. And then the pandemic hits and I get introduced to what I call there's like an Indian girl gang of food writers. Khushbu Shah, Sonia Chopra, Tejal Rao. Like I got introduced to them through her as well. And they all just kind of were so supportive. Khushbu wrote my Diwali feature in Food and Wine that she did about me. And it was the first Diwali feature in any major food magazine, which then they brought me on to do freelance recipe development for Food and Wine. Same with Sonia. Sonia went to Bon Appetit and she's like, I want you to write some recipes for us. And I was like, okay, I'll pitch. And I learned how all that worked off the back and the fact that they were willing to back me, but also make sure that they could vouch for me and my work ethic and what I do. So I feel very lucky to have the community I have, even down to the bloggers. There's bloggers Desi bloggers. I have my little group that, someone got a brand deal. I'm really excited for you. Oh, the same brand reached out to me. Hey, how much did you charge them? So I know how much to charge to make sure that we're all getting paid, Yeah. So there's a lot of camaraderie that I think a lot of people don't realize because it's very quick. People really want to be like, oh, like so-and-so versus so-and-so. Yeah. No.
Is that like the Desi side of us? We're like, oh, where's the goss? Where actually the reality is everyone is so supportive. And I think you have to be like, how could you grow with no one's support? Yeah. It's not possible.
100%. Yeah. The fact that we will get each other's name bigger by supporting each other rather than cutting each other down,
Yeah, I totally agree. So I would love to kind of ask you a little bit about the creative process behind Desi Bakes. Like, how did that start and how long did it take?
So I slowly built my way up to the concept. It started with my beta bark that I did a couple years ago. I wanted to see a different way. Normally benda is little balls squashed a little bit with maybe a thread spool that you push down onto it for a little design, right? I wanted to find a way to do it better and prettier. So I made a bark where it was a layer of Parle G graham cracker crust, the beta, and then a caramelized white chocolate. And then I decorated it with edible flower petals. And I chopped it up really geometrically so it looks very abstract. And that ended up going semi-viral for that time, let's say. And then I started experimenting with the design of my bake. So I did a sari border roll cake. I did a rangoli cheesecake. And I would just push myself with the decorating and just have fun with it. And I realized that people really enjoy the fun way that I bring Indian culture into my bakes. And it's probably I would say a calling card for my bakes. The best compliment is when people are like, oh yeah, I saw that. And I was like, that's a milk and cardamom bake. I know that's a milk and cardamom dessert because I think I have kind of struck a signature look to my sweets, which is again, more is more is more. All the gold, all the flowers, all the hot colors, So I started putting together an idea of taking the handicrafts, textiles, culture that I grew up with and using that as my inspiration for the look of my bakes, of all my desserts. And partially because I grew up surrounded by handicrafts and sewing and textiles and all sorts of crafting. And I wanted to find a way to apply that to my bakes and showcase those handicrafts too while I'm at it. Because unfortunately we live in a world where that kind of stuff is dying. People are mass manufacturing. You don't see people doing handmade embroidery anymore. You see it being done by machines. You don't see people even doing bandhani anymore. People are screen printing the bandhani onto the fabric now, right? These are arts that are not cared about as much anymore. Even if you go to India and you look at clothes, the embroidery is done without any skill in the sense of they didn't finish it on the back properly. It's not hemmed properly. They didn't keep it clean. Like there's threads everywhere because it's the mass manufacturing and the mass production that's being pushed so that it can be cheaper.
Yeah.
Because let's be real, handmade products are expensive and they should be expensive for the amount of
Yeah.
work that's put in it. And then you also have, you know, everyone's going into doctor, engineer, lawyer, and no one wants to stay and do the craft. So the crafts are also dying because there's no one to keep it going. So it's like a mixture of all sorts of stuff that's going on. And I want to make sure that, you know, at least the idea of that craft still exists, or at least people are knowledgeable about it.
It sounds like you're really passionate about especially Gujarati textiles, right? It's a great way to do it through baking and desserts and like educate people and like, raise awareness.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are like, oh, that's like too Indian. I don't want to do all that. But I'm like, there's fun ways that you can incorporate that into your life. It doesn't have to necessarily like, I'm not saying go put some mirror work on your walls.
Yeah.
But maybe put it on a cake.
Yeah, it is a new dimension to cakes. It's your unique background and your unique experience that creates something new and then put that into something that you love, which is why it's so unique, which is how most creatives come up with new ideas, right? It comes from such a personal place. So I know you went to India to do research. Could you tell me a little bit more about that whole trip and like what were like your biggest learnings?
So I went, initially it was going to be like me and my mom, and then my sister's like, I want to come. And then my dad's like, well, I just sold our store, so I'm going to come too. So it turned into like a family trip to India, which was a work trip for me, but a family trip for them, which is extremely anxiety inducing for me because I'm like, I have 4 weeks to get as much content and as much inspiration as I possibly can. And also take care of my parents and, you know, manage everything. But the trip was extremely cathartic because I visited my mom's sister I've never met in my life because she lives so deep in the village that my parents just never took me when I was a kid because it's like 5-6 hours away from any major city. I went to like the farm that my 6 times great grandfather started on my mom's side. I visited my dad's village. And then in each location, what I found was like they would decorate the house with these like torans, which are like either they can be made from beads, crochet, like there's different versions, but basically it's like a door hanging. Mm-hmm. It's like a little piece of art that hangs across the top of your door. I found like beaded pottery and all sorts of stuff that like, you know, my grandmother made or great grandmother made. I even found dabro, which is like a thick matted quilt that you sleep on. You put it on top of the cot and you sleep on it. That my great grandmother made for my grandmother on their wedding day.
Wow.
And you could see that it was hand dyed. You could see that it was hand quilted. You could see that they patched it. And then the patch was block printed with like a peacock block print. Like you could see their hands in it. It sounds really mushy, but like I grew up around a lot of Italian folks who had lots of connection to their, you know, they knew their great grandfather's name and where they came from in Italy. They had written history. And I have zero. I couldn't tell you my great grandmother's name. I don't know. And I think this is like the case for a lot of Indians where we have very little connection or written word or history from our families. Unless you're Brahmin or, you know, upper caste. The things I have left are handmade items that got saved. Whether it's a piece of metal pot with my grandmother's name etched on it, or torans that my great-grandmother crocheted. These are the pieces that I have of my family that have survived. I know nothing other than that they had this skill and that they could do this, and they taught their daughters, who taught their daughters, who taught my mom, who taught me. I feel a strong kinship to that, a deep closeness to things that are handmade, because when you make something with your hands, you're putting time, intention, care, effort into doing something for someone or even yourself. There's feeling behind it. It's not just like a machine mass producing something. And yeah, maybe you drop a stitch or you forget the bead or you mess up the pattern. It doesn't make the intention any less.
Yeah.
Right? One of the things I noticed in India was everything's being mass manufactured. I had such a hard time finding handicraftsmen and galagaris. Like it was impossible.
Yeah.
Trying to find anyone that does anything by hand. Like my fixers took me to like an embroidery warehouse where it was like 20 sewing machines going at it, sewing a sari. And I was like, yeah, no, this is not what I'm looking for. thank you, but no. You
Yeah.
know?
How hard did you have to look?
Very hard.
Yeah.
It was not easy. And I was lucky because my mom's side of the family's been in textiles. So, like, we grow the cotton. My grandfather had a mill, a textile mill. Like, my mom used to sew saris. And our neighbor does, like, beadwork. And, like, I, like, met them all and made it try to see, like, how things are made and what they do and take photos of it. I met, rug makers and bell makers and mirror work artists and weavers, and it took some time, but I was able to find them. But one thing that I came across was there are not enough people putting value to the work they do, and they put more value on the machine made stuff, which is wild.
There's also like the generational gap, right? Because I think the younger generations are not continuing their family's work. Did you look into why?
Money, the value. If the population doesn't value it and they're not willing to, pay for it, so then these makers are forced to drop their prices to even make a sale. Whereas they'll still pay like thousands of dollars on some like mass manufactured outfit. People don't understand the value. I did a collaboration with Surmei, Manasvi. So Manasvi does jewelry design, beautiful jewelry. And I wanted to create a jewelry box because my dad being in the jewelry business. And I went home and I found these pataras, which are these giant rolling chests that are decorated typically, that are gifted to women when they get married to bring all their stuff from their home to their new home. And I found all my grandmother's, my great grandmother's pataras, and
Wow.
they're stunning. So we decided to kind of take a similar vibe, and we wanted to do a fabric on the inside, a lining. We found mushroom silk. Mushroom silk is basically a weave between cotton and silk. And that art form of doing that weave, this one family does it. Like there was that famous Bengali muslin that has like, it used to be really popular in the 1700s, and now no one makes it because no one knows how it was made because they stopped making it. And it was supposed to be a really like special muslin that was like super see-through and thin and like soft. And same with this, I'm sure like mushroom silk will survive up until this family stops making it.
We kind of need recipe books for textiles, basically.
Yeah.
Right? Someone needs to write it down because, yeah, as you said, our histories aren't written down, our family histories aren't, and nor are the ways that, these handicrafts are made. But at least we can educate ourselves now and hopefully raise awareness.
Yeah, and understand like what is good quality and what's not. Like if we're going to spend money on a new Indian outfit, maybe, make sure that you're buying something that's lined, hemmed, embroidered, hand embroidered if possible. That's, there's no threads hanging out. There's no imitation mirrors. They're actually using real mirrors that, nothing's glued on. It's actually embroidered on. Just be more thoughtful in the products you buy if you are able to do so.
I think there is so much importance in learning where your textiles are coming from, right? It's the same as like where your food and your ingredients are coming from, and clearly we care about that. I love the way you've kind of blended the passion for art, textile, design, and baking like all together. I think you can see that there's so much love and like passion there. So I kind of want to get into a little bit more of like the actual process of designing the book itself, because I saw that like you've taken some of those textiles and that like initial research that you've done into the actual book. So how was that like creative direction process like?
It was really fun. So I worked with Swasti Creative on the book design, and I had a very good idea of what I wanted the book to look like. Like I remember sending her messages like, I need more Indian motifs. I need you to change this from a generic geometric design to something a little bit more desi. I was happy that I was able to work with the South Asian designer, because like I can say, oh, I want more Fulkari designs, and she knows what I'm talking about, or at least has a general idea of what I'm talking about. I wanted to make sure that those designs and those motifs were spread through the book. On the spine, I have a Sankirta motif. Sankirta is a design that's done on furniture. It's done on teak wood furniture, typically from gold, red, and green paint. And there are specific motifs that are done on Sankirta furniture. And the one that's on my book spine is one of them, which is like this kind of like foil leaf situation that's staggered. And you normally give Sankera furniture to someone that just had a baby or just got married. And you'll see it on Dandiya, like at Gujarati events. Like you'll see Sankera Dandiya. It's given to someone when like something big is happening. And I was like, oh, this book is a big thing for me. And I wanted to have that motif on the spine. I wanted to make sure that the colors were really bright, joyful, and like really matched my vibe as milk and cardamom on my Instagram, but also like that Gujarati joy of color. Color really can affect your mood, and for me it brings me a lot of happiness and joy, and I wanted to do the same with the book. Like I wanted a book to be beautiful where like if you wanted to put it out as a coffee table, you could, like on as a coffee table book, but also a book that you can cook out of and like make joyful like desserts for your events.
Yeah, I love the fact that you mentioned working with a South Asian designer, right? Because there is so much importance when it comes to a book like this that the designer involved or illustrator, like whoever you're working with, and the whole team has to like respect and understand the culture, right? And it takes that project so much further, and that authenticity like remains, you know? And that definitely comes through. So what was like through the whole process, what was the most difficult part?
I fully had an existential crisis because at one point I was so excited about the design of the desserts that like I also didn't want to force the Indian inspiration into flavor. Like I'm like, I don't really want to add cardamom to this just to add cardamom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have a chocolate cake with a salted vanilla meringue buttercream, and I'm like emailing my editor like there's nothing Indian about this other than the design because it looks like mirror work. Yeah. And I'm like, do I need to add something to this to make it more desi? Like, should I add like cardamom or coffee, filter coffee? I don't know. And she's like, Hetal, are you happy with how it tastes? I'm like, yes. And she's like, okay, that's all. There's still Indian inspiration in it. It doesn't have to, like, don't force it if you can't. I mean, a chocolate cake recipe is a chocolate cake recipe. People still are going to want it. And if they don't want to do the mirror work, at least they have a good chocolate cake recipe.
That's actually such a good lesson because you don't need to add something in just to make it Indian, right? Like, yeah, it's still a great cake. It's a great recipe. And that's such a good point.
Yeah. Yes, it's desi by visual features, maybe not internally by any means, but externally it's all desi. I guess kind of like me. Like externally I am very brown.
We kind of also talked about the recipe testing that you do, and I know you're so passionate about it, and I wanted for you to share a little bit about why it's so important to test your recipes and like the amount of effort that you take for each of your recipes.
I feel like in a world where like putting out as much content as you possibly can, not enough recipe testing is happening. Like when I see people putting out a new recipe every single day, I'm like, how are you testing all of this? Are you even testing all of this? Recipe testing is how, one, I make sure that it's exactly what I want it to be, and two, I know that it is reproducible by everyone else. That's how you gain trust. Like, let's be real, eggs, butter, sugar is not cheap. It is expensive. Yeah. And then you add cardamom and saffron, all the nuts and stuff on top. It is pricey. So if you're going to bake something, I want to make sure that it works out right. And like some of that is on you to make sure that you're using, you know, the right ingredients, make sure that you're using a scale, make sure that you're paying attention to what you're doing. And then a lot of that is also on me to make sure that I'm writing a recipe that is consistent and reproducible. And like I'm not happy with V1 most of the time. Sometimes, you know, I nail it and I'm really good. And like cookies for me are very easy because I already know my formulas for that and ratios. But, you know, sometimes they require a little bit of finessing. Maybe I wanted a chewy cookie and this one came out crispy. Okay, I got to do a V2. Now that didn't work. I got to do a V3. So I will keep going until the recipe is exactly what I want it, so that I know that it's going to work for the end user. And it is work, and it's an art form. And if you're in it for fame, a lot of people won't. They just want to get the recipe, like their food out there. But then you're not going to be very trustworthy. Are people actually making your stuff then? Yeah. Right? Which is why I like this TikTok world and Reel where everyone's got, I hated it when Instagram initially gave you 30 seconds. I'm like, how am I supposed to share a recipe in 30 seconds? So then you see these dumbed down versions of like 3 ingredient cookies, 5 ingredient cake. And I'm like, yeah, because you have to dumb it down so that it can fit in the 30 seconds that you have. Or you'll go on TikTok and you'll see someone share a recipe and they won't give you a single measurement.
Yeah, or like you have to look in the comments. And as someone who has learned it through Instagram and like TikTok, I did not realize until I actually started reading cookbooks that there are actually proper guidelines on how to do all of the little things, right? Like, how do you actually whisk them? Like, some cookbooks provide details on how to whisk, whereas social media, they'll just be like, okay, add this in, mix it together and bake it. And I'm like, okay, but it's not working. And then if you actually look at the details.
Yeah, like they'll say, oh, just mix the butter and sugar together. And then really you have to mix it for 7 minutes. And then like you'll see them bake, but then they won't give them the bake time. Like there's all these like little things that a lot of you'll see like quick content creators or content churners share. And maybe it's a, viral recipe or whatever, but it's hard for people to recreate because there's never any measurements. And I think I want to create a trustworthy, reliable source for recipes, especially when baking's really scary and anxiety-inducing and new to a lot of people. Like, I want them to feel comfortable. You get comfort with trust and you get trust with reliability. It kind of works both ways. That's why you don't see me pushing new recipes out every, day. I'm putting out maybe a new recipe once a week, maybe 2 a week if I'm like feeling real good. But these are recipes that I've tried and tested. As long as you're using a scale and following the directions and not substituting stuff randomly, it should work.
And it seems like you followed this kind of iteration process even when you're doing the book. Is it the same kind of process when you're doing these collaborations, whether it's like jewelry design or textiles?
Yeah, so I am annoying when I do collaborations because I really truly want to collaborate. I'm not slapping my name on something that you already created as a marketing thing. Like I am in it. Like I did Cola Goodies collaboration with her. I spent 3 months putting together, I did over 20 tea mixes.
Wow.
Nailed it down to 5 after doing some blind taste testings. Then had her Sajani come over my house and try the 5 that I made. She then picked 2. From the 2, we narrowed it down to 1. From there, I further did a second and third iteration with various spices, like brands of spices, because every brand is different, and sweeteners, until we got to our final cardamom fennel chai that we created. And that was months long. I just came out with a table linen collection with gapus. That was a year. It was us finding our color palette first. Then it was, okay, do we want to go geometric? Do we want to go traditional floral? And I was like, I'd like something more geometric and fun and contemporary because that's more my style. And then it was finding the block printers. Like she went to India and found the block printers and got the samples and testing done. And then I was like, no, I really want the squiggles. No, this has to be hemmed. It's okay if we can't do this at the other, and like working together to make this happen, Yeah. There was she designed it and I just put my name on it. I am in it to win it.
Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. How do you like transfer those skills from like one discipline to the next? How is it still you? And how are you brave enough to jump disciplines? Because that is a skill.
Mm-hmm. I think it helps working with like Tanushree from Gapus or, Manasvi from Surmei or Rujita from Rumri. Like, they are experts in what they do. I can come in with all of my crazy ideas and then just say, is this possible? Like, what do you think? You're the expert. Because, like, I will always think of over-the-top ideas and then figure it out from there. And it's collaborative because they will have ideas, too. And they already know my aesthetic because I feel like I'm pretty strong with, like, my aesthetic and style. So it becomes, like, a really fun collaboration. Being very honest and open about my critiques with the other person and having that type of relationship also helps, where I can say like, this isn't working for me, and it's like not a diss to anyone other than our design and what we did together, right?
Yeah. I think it goes back to what you were saying right at the start of like being very straight and honest, and that's kind of helped you create products that like actually work and like think about the person who's going to be using it.
I mean, I do even like my house shopping. Like I shared like my couch buying journey I think I tested over like 500 couches and I'm like, these are my parameters on what I need in a couch. It must be colorful. It has to be comfortable. I think I tried like 300 couches. And I gave my rating on like, this is why this doesn't work. And I still have people to this day that are like, which couch should you go with? I have my parameters. I know what I want. And then I need to find that product that fits those parameters the best without making concessions. Or like, if I have to make a concession, which one am I willing to give up? And the same thing goes with my bakes, right? Like, okay, I really want like an eggless tres leches cake, but there's not enough protein in it to hold up to all that liquid. So it turns into a mush or a pudding. Is the texture a concession I'm willing to make? In some people's case, it is. For me, it is not. It goes all the way around. It applies to everything.
Yeah. It seems like you know exactly what you want. Yeah, you're willing to fight for it. And I like that.
Like, I'll wait. I'll wait. I don't need it now. Like, I did my couch shopping a year ago. And I still haven't bought it yet because I'm like, I still haven't found what I wanted.
Oh my God. Yeah. My partner's like that. So I totally understand. But I respect that so much because it's a skill. I think people, including me, are like so impulsive. I'm like, let's just get it, you know? And there is this need for like, you know, respecting the art and finding the perfect product and then respecting people who are putting time and effort to create that for you, you know?
Yep.
I think those are such good reflections. Last question I had, for someone who is wanting to take that jump to do a creative career, do you have any advice for them?
I would say we live in a world where money is important. We still got to pay our rent. I would have it as a side gig until you build it up to the point where you know if I go full-time on this, I will be able to match whatever you're making at that moment. Like, I didn't go full-time until 6 years into it. Everyone thinks like overnight success is going to make you millions. No, the slow gain is better. Going viral is not going to give you engaged community or longevity.
Yeah.
You see people pop up and go viral all the time and then disappear off the face of the earth. Like, what you want to build is a sustainable career. So have your side gig. Once it starts making enough money where you're like, yeah, you know what, if I put all my effort into this, I can match my income or more, then leap in and have a plan and be consistent and get it done. The other thing is, please don't do stuff for free. Please stop doing stuff for exposure. Unless it's some like dream thing, don't do it. It's not going to help you.
Yeah, but your dream should also like have pay in it. Like whoever you're dreaming about should be paying you because they respect you.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked to provide free dessert tables, free books, free time on my, like, you know, and I say no because I'm like, pay me.
Yeah.
This is work. Unless it's for like a nonprofit or a charity, I want to be paid. Yeah. Like, this is my job. This isn't some side thing that I'm doing for fun or for, you know? And like, you should also have this same energy for other creatives. Like, I've definitely reached out to graphic designers that I wanted to work with, and then they gave me their rate, and I'm like, oh, I can't do this. And I'm not going to insult them by saying, hey, can you do half, you know, whatever your rate? I'm going to say, thank you so much. At this time, I cannot afford it. But one day when I get there, I will reach out. Because, like, my budget is not their problem.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Exactly. And it doesn't devalue yourself or them, right? Yeah.
Like, I need to just make sure, like, then I go find someone else that's within my budget. Maybe it's someone a little bit greener. That's fine. But just pay the people. Like, I sent out PR boxes. I made sure that each brand that provided stuff from small businesses was paid. I paid every single one. There was no like, hey, can you send me free products so I can send it out to like PR? Unless you're a corporation, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, we gotta support each other, you know, not like step on each other. So I love that. Yeah, thank you so much for your time. That was wonderful, and I'm so excited to see where you go from here.
Thanks. I'm excited to see like all the other creatives that you talk to. I enjoy hearing other people's stories just as much.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful journey of meeting creatives and people in all different fields, and there are so many South Asians doing wonderful things and have been doing them. We just need to all connect and chat together and collaborate. But yeah.
I agree. I agree.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to follow Hetal on Instagram at milk&cardamom and grab a copy of Desi Bakes to celebrate baking inspired by craft, color, and culture. If you enjoyed our conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend who would appreciate it. Stay connected for updates on new episodes, behind-the-scenes content, and creative industry insights by following us on social media or joining our newsletter at desianddesign.com. That's all for today. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.